Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you've kept up enough, you would know that I'm a determinist. I've made certain videos explaining why I think determinism makes sense, so if you're interested in that and you haven't seen it, you can go ahead and also check those other videos. But basically, being a determinist, there's one objection that people often throw at you, and that's basically, the notion of quantum mechanics and how basically quantum mechanics and determinism, are two things that cannot be logically compatible together, so supposedly. But I'm going to make this video explaining why I don't necessarily think that quantum mechanics gets in the way of living in a deterministic universe. So basically, what makes a lot of people think that basically the universe couldn't possibly be determined is because, yeah, basically the difficulty in solving quantum mechanics. And I think like on the surface, I can understand like where this is coming from. I think a quick summary in terms of trying to understand how quantum, mechanics works is basically considering Schrodinger's cat, basically. So it eventually, says that basically there's a cat in a box and it could both be understood as dead or alive. And you'll never truly know until you open the box and figure out whether or not that the cat is dead or alive. It's difficult to determine, so this is where you can see a lot of people will say that, okay, we couldn't possibly be determinists. That doesn't make any sense because, oh, how do you like reconcile this whole thing with quantum mechanics? And oh, is the cat dead or alive when we can consider it as both dead or alive, and we never truly know up until we open the box and see for ourselves whether or not this cat is dead or alive. So basically, when you open the box to see whether or not the cat is dead or alive, whether or not it's dead or alive, this is essentially when the wave function collapses and then you get your answer. Oh, the cat's dead. Oh, the cat is not dead. So basically, how do we figure this out? It's a very like difficult thing for a lot of people to like wrap their heads around it because basically you're trying to understand the nature of a probability itself. But depending on your view of quantum mechanics, and I think a lot of people unfairly try to throw away determinism right away when it comes to discussing quantum mechanics because the only thing that they want to take, if you ask me at surface level, is that like, okay, basically we have a hard time figuring this out because everything is basically random. And I think that can still be true, just in a different, like, connotation. I like to think of the universe as perhaps randomly deterministic or deterministically random, if that makes sense. Maybe it doesn't make sense to a lot of people, but at least like when I put those words together, I don't think it's actually something difficult to like wrap your head around. So there are many interpretations of quantum mechanics in terms of like how do we rectify or like make this make sense basically in a notion where two like opposite possibilities are both equally possible, but you know only happening as one singular thing once you're finally at like the checkpoint of like I guess like observing and figuring it out, i.e. is the cat dead or alive. But I do like the many worlds interpretation basically. And I think if you actually watch my video on logical determinism, there is a comment of somebody saying that um, it simply cannot make sense because the universe as we understand it is basically random at its core, because basically nobody can actually solve quantum mechanics and whatnot. But I think the many worlds interpretation does do a good job in explaining how all possibilities are possible, even if basically like the wave function collapsed. So the many worlds interpretation, as it basically explains, basically all possibilities are possible in some form or another. There are many worlds basically. So if the cat can be thought of as both dead or alive, there has to be a universe where the cat is one dead, and there has to be a universe where the cat is also, alive. Because I guess the question that I would ask for people that say that, oh, quantum mechanics is purely just random, therefore you cannot have, determinism into the mix, and therefore it doesn't make sense for us to like be determinists. I think it does still make sense for us to be determinists, basically, because the question that I would simply ask is if you're willing to understand that the cat can be thought of as both dead or alive, and it's only knowable once you actually open the box, then where do you actually get the prior information to understand that the cat is both dead or alive? Because when I think of something that's more so just purely random, I mean, life is still meaningless, but if we're just talking about things in terms of like a chain of events or things of like possibilities and whatnot, logical determinism still remains true. So basically, The way I understand it, if you consider like a logical determinist perspective, basically it's not possible for the cat to both be dead and alive at the same time in one particular world. Obviously, that would be coherent, but there's no way to salvage that the opposite is true unless there is some other universe where, some other world, whatever you want to call it, where, okay, in one scenario, yes, the cat is dead, and in one scenario, the cat is basically not dead. And I think this explains statistics basically pretty well because, when you analyze like statistics and whatnot, quantum mechanics is obviously something bigger. But I think the reason why the wave function pretty much collapses is basically because in every single universe, in every single world, the math is basically different. So if we exist in a universe where the cat is dead, there were higher factors that pushed a greater percentage statistically to make this cat dead in this universe. But in another universe, you basically just get the parallel. It's basically completely, the opposite. So if we know things happen from like a logical determinist like standpoint, if we know it's incoherent that something can be both dead or alive, then to me this has to like intuitively say that there are many worlds basically, because again, it stops being right that the cat is both dead and alive, can be thought of as both dead and alive the moment that we open the box and see whether or not this cat is actually dead or alive. So I'm not too well versed, to be honest, in other interpretations of quantum mechanics. I really do like the many worlds interpretation, so this is the one that I've typically used and done the most research on to be able to, like, I guess, like, reconcile both my determinist views and my own understanding of like quantum mechanics and whatnot. So basically, I don't feel like it's only my burden of proof to explain basically why the wave function collapses, because I think like in a purely deterministic understanding, this makes perfect sense in terms of why, the wave function would essentially collapse. Because if it were truly random in the sense that you could only understand that the cat is both dead and alive, then that means, like the way I understand it, basically, it would be impossible for anything to happen. Events could not occur unless the wave function actually collapses. So I don't think we actually have to understand why the wave function collapses itself. You can simply just look at this universe alone, this world that you live in, and obviously there's going to be a reason for why the cat died. There's going to be a reason for, I don't know, if I just like make like the simplest example that like, oh, we weren't able to, go to where we wanted to go because for some reason it was, raining a lot on this particular day. But in another universe where we wanted to go, the bad weather, the thunder, the whatever did not stop us because, again, the math and the factors simply basically just switch up. So you can totally understand why a lot of things are possible while only sticking to one particular thing. Because obviously, if you open the box and you see that the cat is basically like dead or alive, there's no going back, in all honesty, to like wondering whether or not the cat is like dead or alive. Like basically, it's dead or it's alive, depending on like what frame of reference that you have. The only reason that people think determinism, no, no, not determinism, that quantum mechanics is basically so random and it can't be reconciled with determinism because basically they're biased at whatever fixed point that they are, which I think is kind of funny and ironic because a lot of the people that think that determinism and quantum mechanics can't be compatible are the ones talking as though the determinists are the ones that are like, biased at the fixed standpoint basically. But I would argue like, like as a determinist, I'm focusing on basically what actually did happen. And there's no going back the moment something actually does happen. So if you're willing to accept the data in terms of what actually happened in this reality, in this universe, in this world, then sure, I can't exactly like I guess like I can't prove like the many worlds interpretation. Obviously, a lot of this is purely speculative and like purely like theoretical. But I'm just trying to like I guess like explain why I think it is the most like logically sound conclusion, basically. So the only reason that things happen while other things are still possible to happen in like the opposite way is because if the wave function didn't collapse, then there is no question to be asked. If you stop at asking, okay, is the cat dead or alive, and you don't actually like care to like further investigate, then sure, it'll always come across as random. But obviously, that's not the world we live in. the one thing that every single world, I would argue, has in common. So, like, even if you want to say, okay, it could have been different, yeah, it could have been different because it was different somewhere else, not here. So, I don't see any reason why determinism and quantum mechanics cannot be compatible. So, sure, if all possibilities are possible, we just don't know how to explain it, then I think, like, okay, it's the bias of our reference point, basically. So, I guess I would just say, yes, the universe to me is randomly deterministic. Okay, sure, there's no reason that we had to particularly be in the universe where the cat was dead, or there's no particular reason that we also had to be in the universe where the cat could be thought of as alive as well. So, everywhere, everything, all at once, it's all simultaneously happening. But if so many contradictory things were happening all at once, then there would be no fixed point for anything. There would be no reason to even ask the question, is the cat dead or alive? So basically, it's alive or dead here, or it's alive or dead, I don't know, somewhere else, or it's not, or whatever. So basically, this is all determined, and you are fixed in the position in which you are at. So yeah, from what I understand between like many worlds and like stuff, basically, sure, yeah, the universe is still random. Like it doesn't matter what universe I'm actually in, whatever is the rules and like regulation of the grounding of, I don't know, the particles, the molecules, or like whatever to like reach like a certain fixed point. Then okay, it's possible. If you want to deny that our reality is not true just because we don't know why something else is happening in another foundational world where everything is built in like a different way, then in all honesty, I don't really think that a lot of people that talk about this whole like quantum mechanics thing are like actually doing it like sincerely. Because okay, the way I see it, actually, which maybe I wouldn't even necessarily have an issue with. Like, again, like, yeah, it is mind boggling, right? If we cannot truly understand whether or not the cat is dead or alive, even after observing, let's say, like in our specific timeline, then, okay, then why don't we all just say we're ontological nihilists then? Nothing actually exists because of the probabilities just exist, but those probabilities either don't have to happen or they do, then everything is a facade. Everything is basically like, okay, maybe there's no cat, maybe like nothing actually exists, which I'm actually fine with, because at least like I do have that like nihilistic, sort of like edge in my perspective as well. But like if you're religious or anything like that, or like, okay, because like, you know, a lot of people will come after determinism. Oftentimes they are religious because let's say like if you're a Christian, you would argue that like basically God gives you free will. But okay, especially okay, if you are somebody religious, like a Christian or like whatever, like I would like to hear the perspective basically in terms of like how you also reconcile quantum mechanics with like your beliefs and whatnot, because like it seems like the idea of like an afterlife is like so shaky to me. Because like basically if I believe, which I do, that there are like basically many universes with many different factors, so many basically like versions of us, like are there a bunch of me that deserve to go to hell? Are there a bunch of me that deserve to go to like heaven basically? And I don't know. It just makes consciousness seem stupid to me, in all honesty, and like determining okay, moral rightness, moral wrongness, or like whatever. Because I'm just like, yeah, I don't know. It's just a facade, or it's just like an illusion. So basically, those are just some thoughts that I guess like if you're watching this, I would just want you to like chew on or whatever. So yeah, share with me why you think I'm right, why you think I'm wrong, your interpretation of quantum mechanics based on whatever it is that like you believe. But yeah, I guess like me spitballing, this is what I have off the top of my head.